What is this? Why did you deceive me to marry this unattractive dwarf?
Once upon a time, a long time ago, within the confines of a quiet African village, a young couple experienced the joyous arrival of their newborn. However, this child was unlike any other, both in spirit and physical form. Recognizing her uniqueness, her parents, filled with a mix of awe and concern, made a choice to shield her from the curious gaze of the outside world. Determined to nurture her individuality in a protected environment, they decided to keep her secluded within the confines of their home, a haven away from the prying eyes of the world. As time passed, whispers of a girl named Adobe began to weave through the fabric of the village. Her existence became a topic of hushed talks and intrigued speculations. It was said that Adobe, a name that carried with it an air of mystery, was held in seclusion within the protective wall of her home. Her parents, driven by the belief that their daughter possessed an extraordinary quality, had chosen to shield her from the outside world until the time was right for her to come out. The tale of Adobe's seclusion ignited the imagination of the villagers, sparking curiosity and fascination. Some wondered about the nature of her uniqueness, while others pondered the reason behind such protective measures. News of Adobe's uniqueness reached the ears of Akanu, a seasoned and skilled hunter known for his prowess in the wild. Intrigued by the tale surrounding her, a flame of desire kindled within Akanu, and he found himself captivated by the prospect of making Adobe his wife. And so, he set out on a journey with a sense of purpose to win her hand in marriage. As Akanu arrived in Adobe's village, Akanu's arrival stirred the village not only because of his reputation as a skilled hunter, but also due to the whisper of his pursuit of Adobe, the secluded girl with an air of mystery. However, Akanu was not alone in his aspiration. Other suitors, equally drawn to the tale of Adobe's uniqueness, had sought her hand in marriage. Sensing the growing competition, Adobe's father, a wise and discerning man, devised a test to know the intentions and capabilities of the contenders. The test centered around the gift each suitor presented, a reflection of their commitment and suitability to join the family. Undeterred by these challenges, Akanu faced the test with confidence. He showcased his hunting prowess by presenting a bountiful forest kill. As Adobe's father observed Akanu's offering, he nodded in approval, recognizing the sincerity and effort put into the gift. Akanu's success in the test not only won him the approval of Adobe's father, but also left other suitors filled with envy, watching as Akanu secured Adobe's hand in marriage. With the approval secured, Adobe's father, a man of wisdom and foresight, secured Akanu's commitment to the well-being of his daughter. The village gathered in anticipation, and the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of tradition and excitement. Akanu, standing before the assembly, was asked 3 times by Adobe's father if he would take care of Adobe, and was made to swear that he would take care of her. Akanu swore that he would take care of Adobe 3 times and would remain by her side, and her father warned him, never ever will he come out of that marriage except Adobe decides otherwise, and Akanu agreed. After agreeing to this, Adobe's father was happy and then asked for the bride to be brought out. Adobe, veiled in ceremonial garments, was presented to the eagerly waiting eye of the village. However, to the shock and disbelief of the onlooker, Adobe appeared as a short, stout dwarf. The once jubilant crowd were stunned in silence. Akanu, the shock registering on his face, couldn't hide his disappointment and anger. In a fit of rage,
What is this?
He shouted,
Why did you deceive me to marry this unattractive dwarf?
Amidst the confusion, Akanu's competitors, who had previously been watching in envy, burst into laughter. Some even rolling on the floor, relishing in the unexpected turn of events. Adobe, who stood there, was sad, tears streaming down her face. Despite Akanu's anger and the unexpected turn of events, the village elders, adhering to the sanctity of marriage rites, proceeded with the ceremony. Akanu and Adobe were officially pronounced husband and wife, and Akanu was forced to take Adobe home. As the days passed, Akanu's action towards Adobe became increasingly cold and distant. Despite sharing the same roof, he never ever treated Adobe as his wife, as he built a wall around himself, denying Adobe the warmth and companionship that marriage promised. Adobe took care of the house. She cooked, she cleaned, and did everything possible to make Akanu happy. But the emotional void between them remained untouched. Adobe silently endured the loneliness, finding solace in her daily tasks. One day, Akanu returned home with a woman named Ngozika. She exuded a contrasting femininity and beauty that seemed to captivate Akanu's attention. The shock of this revelation hit Adobe hard as she witnessed her husband embracing a new wife. Ngozika, seemingly aware of her allure, intensified Adobe's misery with every glance. Ngozika's presence constantly reminded Adobe of her perceived inadequacies and painted a painful picture of their shattered marriage. As time passed, Akanu paid all his love and attention to Ngozika, paying little or no attention to Adobe. Ngozika, aware of her influence on Akanu, took every chance to make Adobe's life difficult and miserable. One day, Ngozika stooped down to Adobe's height and went all the way to mock Adobe, emphasizing her own looks and femininity, comparing that to Adobe. Adobe's feelings were hot. She was struggling with the difficulties of the reality of her marriage. Ngozika's hurtful words and action chipped away at Adobe's strength, making her feel vulnerable in her own home. One night, Akanu, returning home drunk, mistakenly entered Adobe's room, thinking it was Ngozika's. The confusion went unnoticed until the next morning when Akanu woke up beside Adobe. He reacted with shock and anger. Unaware of the mistake, he blamed Adobe, intensifying the tension in their troubled marriage. Adobe, unfairly facing Akanu's anger, dealt with the aftermath of the situation not of her making, started to shed tears. Adobe, tears streaming down her face, tried to explain to Akanu, but Akanu's rage persisted. This event changed Akanu's life in a surprising way. After that day, after that night with Adobe, opportunities that were closed before him started to open up. Akanu became rich from hunting and selling meat in the village. With his newfound wealth, Akanu built a new house and decided to move Ngozika into the new house, leaving Adobe in the old house. Though both houses were in the same compound, but Akanu never ever visited the old house again, leaving Adobe all alone in the old house. The emotional gap between the two wives became bigger and the distance between the two wives grew wider. Months passed and both wives became pregnant. Adobe welcomed a baby girl into the world, while Ngozika gave birth to a baby boy. This event made Ngozika's cruelty towards Adobe more pronounced. The birth of a male heir seemed to give Ngozika a perceived advantage, making her treatment of Adobe even more harsh and unfair. The emotional strain grew. But Adobe found solace in the boundless love she poured into caring for her daughter Amara. Despite the hardship she faced, Adobe's maternal love became a source of strength for her, a beacon of warmth in the face of the chilling treatment she had endured. The village witnessed Akanu's rise to prominence, and this came at a cost of Adobe's happiness. Despite Adobe's hardship, she remained strong, finding strength in the love she showered on her daughter. As years went by, Adobe focused on raising her daughter with love and kindness, shielding her from the harsh reality of the household. Akanu's wealth continued to grow, and Ngozika continued to enjoy her position of privilege, often flaunting her status and maltreating Adobe in front of all the villagers. Adobe's daughter, Amara, witnessed all this while growing up and wondered why her father would treat her mother this way. Despite the pain and injustice, Adobe instilled in Amara the value of resilience and compassion. One day, the wise elders called Akanu's attention and warned him of the way he was treating his wife Adobe, and urged him to change his way and treat both wives equally. Akanu refused and didn't listen to any of them, and they warned him that he will regret his actions one day. Then, one day, while Akanu was outside, Amara, his daughter, rushed to her father to inform him of her mother's health. Adobe was seriously sick and needed help. Akanu ignored his daughter, paying no attention to her, and when she persisted, he angrily dismissed her. In the following days, Adobe passed away, and Akanu arranged a shabby burial for Adobe, and this made Amara furious. Amara, well aware of her mother's suffering at the hands of her father and her stepmother, decided it was time to leave the village. Despite Akanu's wealth, Amara and her mother Adobe never enjoyed anything from Akanu. He only provided the basic necessity over the years. And on the other hand, the stepmother and the stepbrother enjoyed an affluent lifestyle thanks to Akanu. With a heavy heart, Amara left the village for her grandparents' house, vowing never to return lest she meet the same fate as her mother. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then a few years later, Akanu began to lose his once flourishing fortune, eventually falling into extreme poverty. He couldn't understand the sudden downturn in his fortune and questioned what had gone wrong. His wife and his son, Emeka, who had once enjoyed a life of luxury, now found themselves thrust into a harsh world that they were unprepared to meet. The family descent into hardship became a bitter pill they were forced to swallow. Akanu's son had grown into a spoilt young man. Meanwhile, news circulated about Amara's remarkable success as a businesswoman. She had established numerous stores and branches throughout the town. Ngozika, having heard about her stepdaughter's success, decided to persuade her husband to go visit Amara to seek for help. The weight of their family's predicament was too much for Ngozika, and so she urged her husband, who reluctantly agreed to. After much persuasion, Akanu reluctantly agreed to make the journey, burdened by a mixture of pride and shame. The road to Amara's house seemed longer than ever. Each step mixed with regret and anticipation of what awaited him. As he approached his daughter's residence, he couldn't believe the opulence he met. He was shocked to see that his daughter was extremely rich. He was astounded by the grandeur that surrounded him. The once poor village girl has transformed into a woman of considerable wealth and influence. The splendor of Amara's success left him in utter disbelief, shaking him to his very core. He couldn't reconcile the image of a poor girl he had once abandoned. However, As soon as he was brought into the living room and Amara caught sight of her father, her expression shifted. The memories of abandonment and the years of struggling without his support flooded back. The wounds of the past that had not healed and the pain still raw came flooding. Instead of extending an olive branch, ordered her servant to send her father out of his house and never to allow him in again. Akanu, standing at the gate of his daughter's house, felt a sense of regret, realizing the choices that had led him to this moment. As the gate of prosperity closed before him, Akanu found himself alone with his regrets. Akanu, overwhelmed with sadness, returned back to his village. Desperate for a solution, he sought the wisdom of the elders, pleading with them to accompany him to see his daughter. This time, they convened at Amara's grandparents' house, knowing that Amara would listen to her grandparents. As the elders gathered, mediation began, and Amara's grandmother, looking very sad,
"We gave you our
said to
daughter,
Akanu,
and you mistreated her. She was not just anyone. She was born with a gift. Even if she lacked the physical form you deserved, the way you treated my daughter was so cruel that she suffered until the day she died."
Amara's grandmother said in pain. Then her grandfather continued,
Akanu, Adobe had a special gift of wealth. Any man she married and conceived for would become very rich and will continue to be so unless she wishes otherwise.
Then he kept quiet, looking very sad. Amara continued in a voice carrying the weight of years of pain. My mother's dying wish was for me to leave your house, never to return. And before she died, she passed on the gift of wealth to me, hence the wealth you see in me today. That is the result of the inheritance she passed to me. My mother made you rich, but she never said anything. Her father, stunned and now comprehending the source of his prosperity, opened his mouth in shock. The realization that he mistreated the very source of his good fortune struck him with a heavy truth. Realizing the magnitude of his action, he begged his daughter for forgiveness, pleading with her to return. However, Amara looked at him and responded, Your selfishness knows no bound. Now that I am rich and fortunate, you want me back? I have made a vow never to return back to your house, else I die. As the elder turned to Akanu, saying, We warned you, but you turned a deaf ear. With those words, the elders got up and left. Akanu, carrying the weight of regret, returned to the village. The household he returned to was filled with constant strife between his wife and his son. Akanu sat in his chair, surrounded by the echoes of his mistake, wishing the gods could turn back the hands of time to allow him correct his erring ways.